Voices,
the things they said,
voices,
some from those dead, all the voices heard.
Voices,
Things we say,
voices,
they're in your head, all the voices heard.
Hello, everyone. You have Kempa.
And you have Skylar.
And Shannon.
And Flo.
And our special guest today is Councilmember Katie Valenzuela of District 4 in Sacramento. Katie, how you doing today?
Pretty good. I was chuckling at how cheerful Flo always is when she does her
every
intro.
time.
I really appreciate that, Flo. I need that at the end of the day. It's like, yes.
I don't know. I actually hesitated too, because with some of our regular guests, they will just hop in right after Flo. So I was waiting.
We've had several guests who have done that on their first appearance on the show. And I'm always like, that's a little presumptuous, don't you think? You are a guest in this space.
I've been here before, so I know how it works. It's okay. I wanted to wait my turn.
Next time we'll just workshop that beforehand. Seamlessly run through it. We've just got, I think it's just going to be a full discussion on the last city council meeting from this week today. I was a little late to the game on this. As we mentioned last episode, I am in Europe. I tried watching the city council meeting. Apparently you can't watch city council outside the country. I've had to get a VPN to do this.
It must be a disaster for the Europeans that they can't tune into every SAC city council meeting.
They're just like, oh.
Didn't we find out that Agent Squillian lives there and is like tuning in? So Agent Squillian has apparently figured it out.
He's also on the illegal VPNs, probably.
Oh, okay, probably.
So it's, I mean, Daryl's Crow Council out here, they all have to download that if they want to be able to watch the episodes, the episodes, the city episodes. Today we're going to talk about, I assume some of the police accountability and use of force stuff will come into this conversation today. But I think the main thing that a lot of people want to hear about, I think a lot of our listeners, is something that sped through the council meeting towards the beginning in about 4 minutes that I think happened without a lot of people knowing it was going to happen. And I think that there's a lot that people want to know about this after the fact. So I guess I will give it a little bit of background on this, and then I think that we can just sort of take off from there. But the city council voted unanimously to raise city manager Howard Chan's salary, his annual base salary, from $308,016 to $372,700 a year. This is a 21% increase. I thought this was kind of a weird, well, let me finish this too. This includes his total compensation package, including benefits, will be $431,855 a year. He currently receives $500 per month for an automobile allowance, $100 per month for his cell phone, and $400 a month as a monthly expense allowance, which I believe is just beer money.
Hey,
so
listen,
this is
like somebody on Twitter pointed out to me, you have never tried to manage a cell phone bill on just $32,000 a month. And until you have, I don't think you really have any room to talk about that.
That is a valid point. And I just want to thank the people of Patreon once more for providing me with a car every month so I can get from point A to point B.
And all that beer.
That's actually where most of our money is going to, let's be honest there.
It's White Claw. That's why we're so desperate for that sponsorship.
It's White Claw and newspaper subscriptions. That's it.
There's a lot of newspaper subscriptions. Yeah.
We do have a lot. Obviously this happened very fast. People are very up in arms about this, particularly the progressives and to everyone to the left of them. I think one of the most jarring things is that Councilmember Jay Chenier shoved it through without presentation. So a lot of people viewing the meeting had no idea that this involved a raise for the city manager until they heard leadership from the fire department come on in support of it, saying that they supported that, as well as city council members' raises. Obviously, people are still very angry at City Manager Chan for homeless deaths that have been taking place ever since he took office. But in particular, you know, we had that night of that storm. All of us remember this past winter, in which at least 6 unhoused folks within the city died. That is fresh on all of our memories. And then, of course, there are the 2 police killings, Stephon Clark's in 2018, Daryl Richards, wherein every killer cop involved there is still on payroll and is still out there. This is just setting the stage. Is there anything I missed, anyone?
I would like to say that I think the thing, like, I think in fairness and to just like flat out address the elephant in the room, the thing that people are upset about is not that the bill was pushed through. It's that the bill was voted, it was approved unanimously by all members of city council. Straight up, I think that's what this conversation is about, and that's where the community's anger is. And I guess I would like to take this conversation to say thank you to Katie for reaching out and agreeing to come on and talk to us about it, because I do think that this is a conversation that the community needs to be having. And although I feel like this is going to be maybe not the easiest conversation that we've ever had, I want to start by thanking you for being willing to have it with us in a public setting and allowing us a chance to try and maybe, I don't know, clear the air with the community about this issue a little bit.
Yeah, and I want to thank you all for being willing to let me come on and clear the air a little bit.
Yeah. So yeah, let's start from there, from where Skylar said it. You know, I think 7 of the people on the dais, we expect exactly what happened up there from them. I think a lot of us, you know, we hold you, Katie, as well as Councilmember Mai Vang, to a particular, I guess, standard that's different, because you know, we've been very hopeful and we've seen a lot of our principles reflected in you in your first few months in office. So can you just walk us through how it came to be that I know you can't speak for Mai, but how it came to be that you ended up voting yes for this?
Yeah, I appreciate that. And this started about a month ago, actually. And I can't totally get into the back and forths of of a lot of things, but which is the hardest part of being an elected official. I can't always repeat what I hear in closed session, but I will tell you there was a discussion in closed session about Howard's salary level. The salary level that he was at the time, 308, was lower than a lot of other public executives in the region. And he was asking for a pay increase commensurate to his colleagues. And to put it into context, I wrote down a few of the numbers from the conversation. The Citrus Heights city manager is making 364. The Crocker executive makes 383. The SMUD, I don't know why this is the case. The SMUD executive makes 570, which I was kind of floored by. But there's all these numbers of like people who manage smaller cities, smaller staffs who have less complex challenges that were making more money. And so the conversation was, well, Howard does more than them, so he should be getting paid at least commensurate to what they get paid. This is not my So I think for me, part of what's foreign, and I said this once and a couple people laugh at me, I'm like, for me, I'm not a capitalist, so I don't judge my worth based on how I'm being paid in comparison to my colleagues. So this doesn't really make sense to me, but it did make sense to him. And it made sense to my colleagues that they're like, this was, what they wanted to do was to try to create some, in their definition, pay equity between him and the other public officials in the region. And they wanted to keep him. And so that was the discussion, was moving that forward. I didn't know Jay was going to waive all presentation. I didn't know any of that was going to happen. It did happen really quickly. I was a little caught off guard by that as well. I thought that, I mean, you saw the staff come on the line. She was ready to present. And then they said, nope. I know you can't see our Zoom screen on our side, but she came on, she was ready to present. She said, nope. And then the vote was called. I did post a response to this because I know there's two sides of this, right? There's folks who are mad about the rate of increase because it is a lot of money, which is totally fair. And then there's folks that are mad that we voted to extend the contract of somebody whose performance they disagree with, right? And so I made a post really addressing that latter group. You know, I've only been in office for the last 5 months, but if there's one thing I've learned for certain is that Howard Chan does what he's told. He does what he's told. And this was something that was kind of surprising to me. I was expecting to come in and get a lot more resistance from staff. I was expecting to come in and have people put up blocks in front of my ideas that I had seen not happen. And the excuse we were always given by previous electeds, I'll just throw my predecessor under the bus, was always like, oh no, city staff doesn't like to do that. But that wasn't the case. The case was like when I started pushing for things like the Safe Ground Ordinance and then Safe Ground, when I started pushing for use of force on the agenda, they did it, sometimes begrudgingly, but it was never coming from Howard. Howard was always trying to help me figure out how to move forward the agenda that I had set out. So I found
Can I just stop? And so right now you're starting to get into why you voted yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So I found him to be fair. I found him to be open to change, which is not something that you see in other city managers. Something that I do as a progressive local is I talk to other progressive locals in other cities and counties. That's not usually the case. City managers are not usually unbiased. I've actually talked to some folks that have had like outright hostile city managers that have made their lives really, really hard. And they've like really had to push and maneuver around this person to try to get change done. And that hasn't been my experience with Howard. So when the conversation came down in my mind to, you know, doing something that was being requested of us or potentially losing Howard, knowing what laid out there in terms of, and we can get into some of the specifics that you raised, because I think I also have a lot of thoughts on some of the stuff, especially the officer accountability stuff, which you mentioned. I made the decision that it made sense to give him what he wanted and to keep him on board. And I'll pause there because I see probably lots of thoughts swirling.
To me, one of the biggest questions is do you think that had you voted, like, what do you think the consequences of either abstaining from the vote or voting against this thing would? I mean, because like we can just say right out the gate that this was going to pass no matter what, right? Like right. Seven of those folks. People, we're gonna vote for that no matter what.
Yeah.
Do you think that, for one, do you think that had they not voted for his raise, that Howard would have left? And for two, do you think that there would have been like some sort of political retaliation? Is that what you would expect if you had voted no on this? And do you think it would, because there's people like, for instance, and I asked her if I could use this, this tweet, and she said yes. So this is from Zoe Melissa on this. She says, it should be a citizen commission decision, which it, by being nature of a city council, sort of already is. But it also says the retaliation possible for being a dissenting vote on this is to have the city manager sabotage your projects, present and future, is an inherent roadblock. Now, does that factor into your calculus in voting for this pay increase? I guess I'll just start there.
No, I think what would have happened if it wasn't unanimous is that he would have left anyways. He would have pulled it back and he would have left. I do think that he was considering leaving the city. And what he wanted was to know if all of his bosses wanted to keep him on. And I think if any of us had voted no, then he would have left and we would have been back in the same situation. So that's interesting. That was my perspective. And he never said it to me directly, but we had a lot of conversations leading up to that vote and that decision. And he wanted me to understand where he was coming from. And I wanted him to understand what my concerns were. I'm like, right now, for instance, I'm posting for a field rep person, a council rep position that would make less salary, then this entire increases. Like that just, it bothers me fundamentally. This is a lot of money. And I had a lot of problems with that, and we had to talk that through. But in the end, I feel like he would have left if he didn't feel like he had the support across the council. And I wanted him to know that he had my support.
It feels to me in some way that he's kind of holding our city hostage, and he makes a gross amount of money already, and it's just very galling that he would go about it this way. Flo, you had some questions around like sort of over if, given particular historical things, if a raise is warranted, right?
Yeah, I mean, you kind of got into this in the intro, Dave, and so this is what comes up for me. I thought Howard was kind of middle of the road on things. I don't see him necessarily as obstructionary, although I don't see him as being supportive. And I guess that's the thing that has always come up for me, is that, number one, I thought the place where I went from, I think Howard might be a problem, to this is a fireable offense, was when he was quoted in the Bee in Teresa Cliff's piece as basically saying, in the face of 6 people being dead, that he would not have opened the warming centers that were open the very night before. Because to me, that shows a level of callous indifference to fellow human beings that I just don't think, I think that there's no way that's like operating in isolation, and has to permeate into everything else you do. And so what comes up for me when it comes to Howard is, I think he is everything that you described, Katie. I think he will follow direction, in some ways in an agnostic fashion, but he does have his own feelings about things. But I also think that that also means that he's often taking the moderated position, which is that when he knows something is right, he sets the agenda equally with the mayor, and he could have brought the use of force recommendations to the council as a recommendation from him years ago. He could have said, when he set that agenda less than 24 hours in advance, he could have said, I think we should reopen the warming shelters because weather forecasts exist, and this seems like a big deal, and it was just open last night. He could have made the decision after council adjourned to open the shelters when he had not just a weather forecast, but the weather we were all experiencing. And so it is hard for me to fathom that somebody like that would be extended on, that we would see that as a net positive, and that we would also see giving this person more money than an increase in money that's more than many people in this region make, period.
Yeah.
And that brings him up to being like 1/10 of 1% in this region. Like, I don't get it. And I guess I'm trying to figure out why you feel it's a net positive to retain this person in this job, given that. Like, I'm the chair of Measure U, like I've worked with Howard, and I went from to, oh, hell no, you have to go. When he said that, I just, like, the human being in me is like, how dare you, Howard? Like I couldn't imagine. I mean, it felt almost it felt more jarring to me than when Daryl said, I'm not in a position to second guess the police, because at least Daryl had the balls to say what he was actually thinking. And that was this was, I wouldn't make a different decision when people are dead. Like, I don't even know what to do with that.
No, I get that. And he could have done all of those things that you said. And I think for me, I guess part of the reason that I'll just say I take responsibility for what happened that night. I think the mayor takes responsibility, or should. I did not push him as hard as I should have when I texted him to see if the warming center was going to be open. And he said it doesn't meet the criteria. I should have pushed because I was in a position to. But I had been told since the day I got sworn in that we couldn't do anything about this criteria. It's out of our hands. We can't change it. And that wasn't just from Howard. That was from the mayor. That was from the city attorney. No, we can't do that. We can't do it. It'll get us in trouble. It'll do this and this for different reasons. So this had come up before, right? Because we've been asking for the warming center criteria to change, and over and over and over again, the city council has decided not to change that criteria. So when he said, look, the criteria hasn't been met, he was following the direction of the council, and I did not push him harder. And that's why I take and have still a lot of guilt over what happened that night, and have never taken no for an answer again since then, because I realized after that night, when the next meeting was called and the mayor called the meeting and figured out a way to magically change the criteria, that I shouldn't have accepted that answer, and I should have pushed, because he was my employee, and I should have said, no, I demand that you do this. I will go down there and staff it myself if we can't get the staff in there. I should have done that. And that was a role that I take responsibility for as the council member for the district that was in, because if I had done that, I think he would have, but I accepted his answer.
And I appreciate you for taking accountability for that, Katie. So I want to say that. But also, he could have just done it, because see, when you all are in session, he has authority. And I worry about handing the keys to the city, literally, when council is not in session, to a person who has that level of callous disregard. Because you're absolutely right to take accountability. Where the hell is his accountability? Is my question.
Well, and you think about like the person who was previously, you think about the person who's previously in the seat though. And so the stories that I have heard is that people say things in one meeting, they say things in front of council or to the media, and then the minute they drive away, they're calling Howard and saying, don't do that. Do not do that. I don't want that to happen. And so I don't think he knew me well enough to know that I wouldn't light him up if he did that last minute. I hoped he did. Because I had been pretty vocal, but like he was following the previous practice, and I get it, because he was a person and he could have said, screw it, I don't care if they get mad at me, I'm gonna do this anyways, but he's a bureaucrat at the same time. And
that's the point.
Yeah.
That's exactly my point. And I feel like that storm was so bad that night that it should have, like, first of all, it's not just the warming center criteria. It's don't we have something about emergencies or whatever? Like, this was like this was a terrible storm. And I just feel like if you can't do a better job than a robot, you don't deserve to be making $400,000 a year.
This is exactly kind of what I wanted to get to, is because I feel, and I want to echo Flo's sentiment that I appreciate you being willing to like jump on that grenade and kind of get out and protect Howard with your own body there. And I think that's a noble thing for you to do. But you're also, by doing that, seemingly to me, presenting Howard as just somebody who just does whatever you guys say and doesn't really have any, he doesn't seem to like really do that much other than execute the will of city council and the mayor, which is, I mean, like, sorry to keep doing this, but there's another tweet that I wanted to bring up to you that says, so let me get this straight. You go on about Howard Chan holds no real responsibility and he's only an employee of the council, but then you try and justify him being back to close to $500,000. Like, how does that add up? If he's just a yes man for you guys, then why are we paying him $500,000 in a condition where like other city employees are all taking cuts right now and nobody in the city he manages can afford their rents?
Well, nobody else in the city is taking cuts right now. The state's taking cuts. Yeah,
Sorry,
but like we haven't cut anybody's salary. And in fact, a lot of the unions, including the police union, got their pay increases this year, which is a whole nother conversation. But no, I get it. I get why people are, and this is what I say, like for me, I mean, I don't think any public official should be making more than a certain amount of money. Like, I'm making more money now than I ever have in my career. And it's nice because I've always worked for nonprofits and I'm paying off debt and I'm finally putting money into a retirement account that I never had before. And that's cool. But it's like, it's weird. And I don't understand why public officials need that much money. I get that. But I'm also a socialist. So I'm just like, maybe like I am trying to look through the other shoes here. He manages 5,000 staff, billions of dollars in assets. I mean, he's doing a lot on the bureaucratic side. It is bureaucracy. He isn't a policy setter. He's an implementer, right? And I don't know. I think for me, what it keeps coming down to is if he left, who would we get? And I think we all have this fantasy of like Flo becoming city manager or something like that, which like would be fun.
It's Shannon in my fantasy.
I mean, Shannon would be amazing, but like the reality is we'd get one of the assistant city managers, right? Or we'd get a city manager from another city. And like, I mean, is that going to be different? Is that going to be better? And so I think we also, for me, and this is the part that's hardest of being an elected for me, is that I can't hide from a vote. Somebody said this to me the other day, and I was just like, no truer words have been spoken in your life. I can't hide for a vote. I'm voting yes, I'm voting no. There's consequences to everything that I do. And in this case, I was looking down the line of what happens if Howard leaves. And in my mind, it wasn't that we get the person who's out there on the storm night saying, let's open the shelters, let's call all the staff in, let's do this. I don't think that person exists in a bureaucratic role. And that's, and maybe I'm wrong, and I would love to be wrong, but it's a calculus.
I think what's hard about this is, well, no, not what's hard about this, because the whole thing is, this is going to go on the radio, so I can't say the swear that I was going to say.
Is this a radio one? Because I was hoping to cuss at some point. But,
you can't. You just have to apologize to Mickey.
I think, there's a part of everything that happened that evening and in the follow-up with your statement, Katie, that was on Facebook and I think Twitter. Or there was something on Twitter, on the Soch. There was a statement. You can find it on the Soch that I keep going back to, which is, where you talk about working hard to change policies in the minds of your colleagues, because that's where Howard's actions stem from, not his personal beliefs. And I think that that's a little bit grating for me, because I, as a person who goes to my job every day, have a whole set of beliefs, certainly that are my personal ones. But I think what we're talking about here are values. We're talking about a person's core values. And what Howard has shown us is that his values, based on just the callous decision on the night of January 26th, where 6 people died, his values are not in line with what's best for the most vulnerable people in our community. And the thing I think about that is certainly everybody makes mistakes, but on top of that, he said he would do it again. And the entire council decided to affirm that person whose set of core values did not line up with mitigating factors that on the night of a deadly storm. And you all said, yep, we want.
Which, by the way, put him at odds with like a majorly politically activated part of the city, right? Like a lot of the people who are the crew who are like down for the cause and down to go knock doors and down to go spend their afternoons and whatnot. Like that action put them at odds with Howard in a lot of ways. And now by this unanimous vote, one of my worries is that, like, now those people are at odds with you and with and with the rest of city council, which this city can't afford that. We need a unified leftist front in the city, in this district specifically. And I'm worried that that's kind of in jeopardy right now, based on that vote.
And I think that the other part of that is that, I think we have all at one time or another have agreed and appreciated, Katie, your the accountability that you have taken on as that evening for what happened that evening. And I'm using that evening as an example because certainly there are others. But when it all comes out in the wash, we are still dealing with a set of core values that differentiate your behavior from Howard's behavior. Your decision-making from Howard's decision-making, and you aligned yourself with him that night. And as a result of that, it doesn't matter. Like, I can appreciate when you say, I'm real sorry about not pushing harder that night, but But then when it's like, here you go, like, because when it's a fear-driven approach to elevating a person's salary because we're just not sure what might happen if we don't, we'd rather keep the person with the shitty values
The
than
devil
maybe
we know.
than
right?
maybe get the devil we know idea, right? Like that's a hard thing to sit with. And I think I just want to name that it's a hard thing to sit with when you've watched somebody like do some rad shit in the community. And I also want to say, like, I get that, like, holding you and, we've said before, Mai up so high, it comes at a weight, but also you signed up for it.
Yeah. Yeah, I did.
I mean, Katie, here, let me ask you one question. If you had been city manager on January 26th, and you had 5 to 9 of your city council members texting you, and you heard winds whipping outside your window, and you could see trees falling, and you had all of that empirical evidence. I'm giving them the benefit of they didn't catch the forecast. They missed it when they were putting together this emergency meeting or special meeting, which only has to be posted 24 hours in advance. But I'm giving them the benefit of you sitting on the dais and you're experiencing this. And then afterward, all of the people are calling and doing this. Would you have made that same call?
That's a great question. I'm going to try to put this in context to help answer, because I'm honestly not sure how I would answer that question. Because the understanding from the city before the weather criteria was changed was that we could not compel our staff to work at a warming center if it hadn't met the county criteria. That was one of the answers I was given, right? Is that the way this agreement works, unless this criteria is met, you can't tell them that they have to come down here at 8 p.m. and be here for 12 hours. Like that would be a violation of the labor agreement. So I'd be looking at a situation where potentially no city staff would show up. Maybe I would be like, hey, council members, can you, like, how quickly can you get folks down there? Because we'd need to be all volunteer, which frankly the warming center was after this, right? It's like, we'd need this to be all volunteer. We'd need to figure that out. And if I could figure out how to make it work, I would. So yeah, if I could have figured out how to make it work, I would have, given that I had that many council members inquiring. But this is where my ownership comes in. And I'm not just doing this to throw myself on a grenade for Howard. I know it looks like that. I've really thought back on what I said to him that night. And would he have reasonably interpreted me as saying, do it anyways? And I don't think he would have interpreted me as saying that. What I said was, is it going to open tonight? There's a big storm coming in. What he said was, it hasn't met the criteria. And I said, okay. Now, would I have assumed as my employee that meant figure it out anyways, do it anyways? I don't know. Maybe he could have read between the lines, but like, frankly, that's why I'm taking ownership of this, is because I didn't say, Howard, we need to figure this out. Howard, like, let's get on a call. Let's see if we can get this going. I didn't do that. And so would he have known that that's what I wanted him to do? I don't know. Should he have known on his own? Frankly, I'll be honest, that night I wasn't paying attention to the forecast. It was a really freaking busy couple of days. I didn't realize how bad that storm was going to be until a couple hours before council started. And I was like, and people were texting me, right, and saying, hey, are the shelters going to be open? There's a storm coming in. And I was like, whoa, really? Like, I did not know. We're sitting there in council and I'm hearing hail come down. And I'm like, holy crap. Like, this is, I had no idea this was coming. So this is what I'm talking about in terms of, like, did he know that the storm was going to be that bad? I don't know. But I didn't say, do it, let's figure this out, Howard. And that's why I'm taking ownership of that, because he gave me an answer and I said, okay.
But I guess what I'm saying is, I feel like you're right to take the ownership on your part. What I'm saying is also, he is the city manager. And if he wanted to do something, he could have called the county health officer and seen if she could make a declaration of emergency because of the weather. He could have called, I mean, like, he has options too. And I guess that's where I'm struggling is he do good yes man, in which case he could make $47,000 a year and be fine, or whatever the living wage is, right, and be fine, right? Or is he high-powered thinker who is running the city and setting the agendas with the mayor and doing that, because then if so, you're accountable for these decisions and I expect more from you. So like either way, I'm not meeting the minimum criteria of like, has he done a good job? Because it's like, I feel like the places where he can think and interject his own like his own contributions, I feel like he's not. And then I feel like what he does interject seems callous rather than just like, he didn't say the council didn't tell me yes. He said, I made a call and I stand by that call holding 6 bodies in my arms. And that's the part that just doesn't jive with me. It's like, you're saying here, you might've made a different call, but so then why aren't so then that's the difference in values between you and him, is that he's firm where he stands and he has no regrets.
Well, and one more thing I want to put in, just because I think it's important context and not in response to what you say, Flo, because you make a good point, is that this in December, they changed the criteria from 3 nights to 1, right? And so that was announced on my first council meeting night. And I was like, cool, let's get it further. We need to do more, right? So they had just finished all these conversations with Dr. Kassirier. And I was not in those conversations. It was before I was sworn in, but like everything
That's the public health
officer, for the county.
Yes.
Who makes those criteria, right? And everything I heard was that was this big fight, that like, it wasn't like that was as low as we could get it, that they weren't going to do any more than that, that these criteria were the criteria we had, and this was the restriction we were under. Obviously that wasn't the case, because the next day the mayor figured out a way to change it, right? And it's just like, well, and that's why I'm just like, for me, that's where my ownership comes in. So I'm like, I should have known. And now I do know how to consult other people, how to bring people into that process, because clearly there were facts at play that I wasn't aware of that I could have pushed on if we were able to figure it out the day after the storm, clearly. So this isn't in context, like, and that's what I'm saying from a bureaucratic perspective. Does it share my values? No, I'm just saying like, this was all the factors that went into him being like, no, the criteria hasn't been met. I can't call in the staff. Like, we can't do this. And me saying, okay. And then, in hindsight, what he said, I think was like, would you done again? I'm not sure. It's like,
which is to me, that's unconscionable.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Can I interject with, I think a central part of Flo's question, which I think she like knows the answers to these questions and she's just playing coy with us, is like a lot of our confusion over Howard Chan's how powerful he is or how powerful he isn't. A lot of the confusion comes directly from our mayor and from his original push for the strong mayor, right? He spent all of this time saying, I can't do anything. It's a city manager, powerful government. Howard Chan runs the show in this city. You got to vote for this thing. And then he loses. And then after he says all that, and we're all like, you know what? Howard Chan does hold a lot of culpability for the terrible things that are happening in our city, for the unhoused folks dying in the cold, for Black and brown boys getting killed by our cops.
Because Howard Chan cannot dump money into the police budget fast enough. I feel like every time I turn around, anytime there's a surplus, Howard Chan is trying to just hire more cops in a city where the cops are out of control. Sorry.
And that's a decision. And I have not heard on the record, I don't know what's happening behind the closed doors, but I've not heard on the record anybody on the dais saying we need 30 new cops. And that's what Howard is always hell bent on.
Can I just say though, is anybody saying no? Besides me and Mai, they voted on the highest salary. I'm just saying, okay, in context, right? This is a very pro cop.
It both ways, and this is where this is why I feel like DJ called, like, congratulations, you played yourself. Because when he wants to do something, he will just do it without your explicit like direction. But when he doesn't want to do something, all of a sudden it's, well, the council has to give me explicit direction.
Yes, and the council does the exact same thing on their side.
And so that's why I'm not playing this game with Howard, because Howard is the slickest man in Sacramento. He is constantly playing both sides, and I'm tired of his shit, quite frankly.
Yeah. So after the mayor loses strong mayor, people get privy to this and they start saying, you know what? Howard does deserve a visit. Howard does deserve his own protests, the same way that other folks deserve their protests. So they start going out and doing that. After that happens, you have city council saying, oh, well, no, he's just our employee. He doesn't have any power. He doesn't make any major decisions. Come to us. You elect us. That's bullshit. And so like that to me is this sort of this runaround, and it's the same runaround in that LA Times piece where they trying to paint us as backing domestic terrorism, right? Like where they're going on there saying, wow, look at this poor city manager looking through his blinds. This motherfucker is making $500,000 a year to let 6 people a night die in our streets. Like and I'm sorry, I didn't want to get yelly this episode, but it's maddening to me that people would even say, don't focus your ire against Howard.
Well, not only that, like, even if, let's say that even if it is a thing where like, oh, you can't be that mad at Howard because he's just a yes man for the city or whatever. Like we've kind of just gotten through that. But then like the other side of it is then for him to go on. I mean, like it seems to me, and I don't know, I guess that much about it, but like city managers usually operate behind the scenes, and to become so famous in your city is to have people like show up at your house and protest you sort of like speaks to the fact that maybe you aren't doing your job very well, right? Like it's like most cities don't know who their city managers are. Most people in their cities, right?
Yeah.
So then for him to have that, like ever since have that like month, you know, that stretch of time in between January and like March or whatever, and then to come out and be like, if you guys don't give me a 21% raise, I'm leaving. That's the part for me. Like, I mean, all of it sucks, right? But that's the part for me that's like, wait, what? Like, yeah. No, absolutely not. Like,
bye.
Like to me, it's such an obvious, like, goodbye. Like, yes, I get that presents an unknown and an X factor, but to me, this guy kind of has just been showing his ass for a really, really long time. And kind of like, you know, like Dave says, the gall of just being like, well, give me a bunch more money or I'm going to leave is like, it's an easy thing for me to be like, goodbye. Like these for like $300,000, you have to be able to find somebody who's halfway competent as a city manager. Like I don't know. Obviously I'm somewhat out of my depth here, and I've never tried to hire a city manager. But like you can't. It cannot be the only way to go about this.
Can I chime in here?
Are his colleagues any better though? I mean, like I guess you get what you pay for, but I guess what I would look around and say is Citrus Heights getting a great city manager? Like what does Citrus Heights have to show for its city management and what it's gotten for $336,000? What do these other places have to show for it? Because I don't know. I just find myself really frustrated that Howard has been able to position himself as being in a position that clearly has some power because people were trying to take it away, but also be able to position himself as if he is this like damsel in distress that needs your protection. And I find it really challenging.
Appalling.
I mean, appalling.
So I want to chime in on a couple of points here, and we can disagree, and that's totally okay. Mm-hmm. I do not think anything Howard is doing is out of whack with what my colleagues want. And I'm going to use the police budget as an example. This is an incredibly pro-cop council, right? Like this is an incredibly pro-cop council. They all want more money for law enforcement. Mai and I are the only ones right now who are saying, whoa, what? Like 5 more positions, $10 more? Are you kidding me? Like that's not in alignment with what we want. And we're having those discussions behind the scenes, but we are the only 2 council members of his 9 bosses that are saying that. I don't think, and this is what I'm saying, right? Is it's just like, it'd be one thing if he was doing that and the whole council was like, whoa, that's way out of line. Where the hell did you come up with those numbers? That is not what is happening. He is doing what the council wants. I don't want it, but like he's doing the majority. And part of why Daryl wanted his power is because every time Daryl didn't have 4 other people who agreed with him, Howard would be like, I'm doing what the majority wants. Like this is the way it is. And that's why he wanted that power. It is easy to blame Howard It is easy to blame Howard. That's part of his job, is to take the blame for the shit that we don't want people to see, the things that happen behind the scenes, the phone calls he gets after council. I know I said that, but I don't want that. He's the guy who takes all of that and makes it happen the way his bosses want it to happen, and he takes the hit. But he has never done anything that I have seen that has not been consistent with what a majority of this council wants. And it includes the cop money. It includes all of it. You think that use of force standards, like, this was not the first time that this had come up. This wasn't the first time the commission had brought up, like, yo, when are you going to vote on our standards?
Your vote for his
how many
raise
people
aligned
would
you
it
with
take? How many
aligned you
people
with
would
the
it
rest
take
of
to get it on the
council
ballot?
members, though?
It takes one person to get it on the agenda, right? And that is what I did for this use of force standards last week, right? I am the one who pushed behind the scenes every day when that agenda got posted on Thursday, and those use of force standards were not on there. There were some very yelly text messages that happened, and the agenda got amended on Friday to include it because I pushed for it. Nobody else was pushing for that. Nobody else was pushing for that. I mean, maybe they were and I didn't know it, but like, this is what I'm talking about. It is easy to blame Howard for the shit that's going on in this city. And there's a lot of shit that is going on in this city, but at every step of the way, this council could have changed those warming center criteria years ago. They could have said, we don't want this more money going to law enforcement years ago. And that's what would have happened. And this would never have happened. This is the council's doing. And that's the only reason. And I'm not excusing, you're making good points about individual statements and individual moments, but like, there is not one other person who has been quoted saying, gosh, this police budget isn't in alignment with my values, because it is in alignment with their values. And that is what he sees his job as, for better or for worse, is to align with what the council values majority are. And I'm not saying I agree with it, right? That's why I said in my post, I don't agree with what he does, but my problem is not with him, it's with my colleagues. My problem is that if I had more colleagues who were willing to say no and say it publicly, that this wouldn't be what's coming out from the city's proposed budget.
There is a concern that your vote for his raise aligns you with your colleagues too. And none of us, I think on that tweet thread, I think that was a little reductive to say that, you know, there are some people who think that Howard, you know, losing his job is going to like solve everything. No one's saying that. Like, we just have legitimate concerns with him and by proxy city council members. And I think what really hurt a lot of people was that you and Mai voting yes to a 20% raise that results in him getting $500,000 a year. It starts to align you with these other council members who do want these vile things, who do want more cops.
I get that. And I mean, I can't make people think differently about that. All I can do is keep doing what I'm doing on the policies that I'm pushing and taking the votes that I'm taking, and continue to have those fights, both in public and behind the scenes. You know, I hope that decision doesn't erase all of the other things that we've done in the last 5 months. I get how it might, but I'm telling, you know, I've explained it, and I get that some people don't find that satisfactory. There is no clear answer here for me. There was no win here. Either way I went, it was going to be shitty for everybody. And and you say the devil, you know, right? And it was just like, maybe that was it, right? It's just like, look, I know this person. I know he's fair. In the end, he's going to work with me. In the end, if I can convince the majority of my colleagues, he's going to do that. I haven't seen that be the case in some other cities. I've heard the war stories from other council members, right? It's just like.
Can I ask about this use of force thing? Are you allowed to give us any background sort of on how that did end up? Because that is a win. I am glad that got voted through, obviously, and hopefully that can result in some real change, some real culpability as far as our police officers' actions. Is there anything you can speak to about how hard it was to get that on?
I will say it was very hard. There were lots of phone calls.
Without naming names, like what is the opposition on the council to this? If you have enough colleagues that you don't have to name names, you can just
Yeah,
say it
I
general.
think there were people who were concerned that this would increase liability for the city. And I'm not even really drawing too many conclusions, because half of this was written in the staff chart that got published, which was pretty hard to read, because you have folks saying, nope, this is going to increase our liability. Nope. You still don't get to see the Police Officers Association letters that we get sent. I don't know why. Still trying to figure out if I can share those publicly with people. But we'll just say there was a lot of very strongly worded language behind the scene about this is going to increase our liability. We can't do this. And I mean, for me and my
liability.
Yeah, increase the city's liability. And part of what they were resting that on was the definition, which was the mayor's memo and that whole kerfuffle. But the other part of it, I think, was the higher standard. And frankly, that was part of the discussion from my side was, I don't care if this costs us $100 million in liability. I really don't care what this is going to cost us if it means that maybe we save one life, or maybe the next time a Stephon Clark happens, we can fire those officers because they would have violated policy. This is the answer I get, because I asked this question. It was one of the first questions I asked. Why didn't we fire the cops who shot Stephon Clark? And I can get into this because it's not public, it's not an active discipline thing anymore. And the answer I got was very clear. They said they didn't violate policy. Was it right? Nobody said anything about that, right? But in the end, what they said is they didn't violate policy because Sac PD's policy was crap and it had too many loopholes and it wasn't specific enough. And in the end, I mean, we just saw the officer in Atlanta that killed Richard Brooks got reinstated. This is what we're up against with them giving binding arbitration to them for discipline. Like we have to be able to say, you did this thing that we told you not to do and you're fired. And our policy wasn't written that way. I will say, and I mean, this is, again, I'm not trying to be, I know I say this and I sounded like it. I'm not trying to be a Howard defender. Howard has fired more cops than any other city manager has. And I will go to the mat on that until someone proves me the numbers otherwise. He has fired more cops. And part of what, and this is what I was trying to tell some folks before some of the protests at his house. I'm like, this is actually one thing that him and I do agree is insufficient. Like the standard isn't clear enough. If the standard is more clear, this doesn't happen anymore because it's clear to say, you chased him into his yard, he was retreating, all of these things happen, you should not have fired, and they would have been fired, right? But that was the conversation behind the scenes, was a lot of very principled, are you seriously telling me that you don't think we should use lethal force as a last resort conversations? Yeah.
Can I ask you, I want to take it back, kind of what we were talking about before the use of force thing came up. And one of the concerns that I have around this entire situation is that, from what I can tell, the temperature that I've been able to take of the community, a lot of people are feel pretty disaffected and pretty let down, including a lot of people. Like, I mean, you know, I can speak from personal experience. Like, I campaigned for you, I knocked doors for you when you were running. And there's a lot of people who did the same, who are kind of feeling like what the hell? Like, why? What's, you know, what? How could she vote like this? She was supposed to be the one who had our backs, and who wasn't one of these other council members who like clearly don't care about us, right, and don't have our best interests at heart. And I think we are in a moment, I feel like, I mean, on a national scale, where people are like completely disenchanted by the political process in general. And I think there's a lot of people who like would be allies, like in Sacramento, who see things like this and they just get turned off. Like, see, it's just, you know, like she was supposed to be a different kind of a deal, and she's just another one of these city council people, and nobody can be trusted. Nobody has our backs, and the entire system is corrupt on its face. I'm wondering if you will speak directly to those, because I know that you know what I'm talking about with like these kinds of voters, and like in that feeling that I think, you know, has come up. I'm wondering if you can speak directly to those folks, and if you have anything to say in terms of like this is why you shouldn't give up on this process, and this is why you need to stay engaged.
Yeah, I will say that this was probably the biggest reason I didn't want to run, the biggest con in that column when I was looking at taking elected office, because I knew I'd watched enough council meetings, I'd watched enough, federal, state level. I knew that at every point, every elected gets in a position where they've got to make a call in a world of crappy decisions. And there was no right decision here in my mind. Vote no, lose a city manager I know I can work with to try to make the change that I promised to people, and roll the dice on somebody else coming in that hopefully is as good, or maybe worse, or maybe better. Hopefully, I don't know. Knowing my colleagues, knowing what they would be looking for in a council city manager when they hired them, or say yes and know that it was going to disappoint people, but also know that it was the better option in my mind. And I get that people are frustrated by this. As I said, I hope that this doesn't turn you off to all the other things we've done, that we're trying to do, that we're still trying to do. We've been out front in a lot of ways. We've said no when everybody else said yes many times. I know not a lot of people only know about these votes after they happen and they pop up on Twitter and they say, I can't believe it. And they miss all the times that we voted down, all the things when we were the only no votes on the mid-year budget, when we were the only no votes on Aggie Square, when Mai and I were the only folks saying, whoa, what are you doing? And all the behind the scenes stuff that nobody gets to see, where we're fighting and asking questions and trying to chip away and piece apart budgets and figure out what the heck's going on. I hope it doesn't overshadow all of that. I also know that I'll have to earn that trust back. Hopefully that's a possibility for people to earn that trust back. But all I can do is say that I appreciate that this was a crappy decision in a sea of crappy decisions. And that in my mind, I don't know. I could see how it could have played out the other way. I don't know if it would have been better. You have to look at the totality of circumstances, and that's what sucks. As I said before, you can't hide from decisions when you're unelected, and that's part of the trade-off that I made. They talk about diversity of tactics. This is the tactic I chose. I knew this would happen. At some point, I didn't know it would be this, but that's the call. That this is why people don't run, but this is also the reason why it's hard as progressives. I just want to say that as progressives, I get why we're hard on our own, and I accept the higher level of accountability. And I hope that folks appreciate, again, the totality of the circumstances. Because sometimes I think we push so hard that we push people completely away and make it really impossible for them to do anything good. And that's my greatest fear moving forward.
I think we can leave it at that. Is there anything else anyone wanted to add?
One last thing is just I want to say that I appreciate you coming on and talking to us. I think that regardless of what people's feelings are about this decision, having a city council member who's willing to come on a local podcast for leftists and have this discussion and have, regardless of how people come away feeling about it, I think we can all appreciate that that's a pretty special thing. And
absolutely.
And I want to say thank you, because I think that's worth a lot, not just to me, but I think that's worth a lot to the community.
Yeah, ditto to all that.
Yeah, you could just as easily have been like any of the other people on city council and just told the city to, all of your constituents to fuck themselves and gone about your day. But you didn't do it. You didn't do that, and I think you deserve some recognition for that.
We made it 59 minutes without a curse. That was pretty good.
You cursed earlier.
Oh, did I?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
I pressed a couple times.
Yeah.
You definitely
you all are-
said,
I didn't even notice.
you said,
I'm feeling
Yeah.
embarrassed because you made me.
I mean,
I'm feeling embarrassed because honestly, I think something that Mai and I talk a lot about is just how lonely this job is. So because there's so many things that people don't see, that they can't see.
Yeah.
So I just want to say thank you to you, and thank you to everybody who's listening. Honestly, I know a lot of people are pissed. I've had a lot of conversations with people. I'll continue to have those conversations. I get that it won't ever be good enough for some folks who want to write me off forever, but I just appreciate the chance to explain.
Absolutely.
And God, I hate it when I cry like this, but
It's okay. It's the new face of
it's
leadership.
real.
Absolutely.
Real people
Thank-
cry.
I do think that that opacity and this culture of opacity in our elected office, I think it does take a toll on folks. And I think if we were allowed to have more transparent conversation, especially around how the sausage is made, I think it would just be healthier, not just for you as electeds, but for every resident in the city as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And to be clear, this is not me playing the victim. I'm already anticipating the other side of this. It's just me appreciating a moment to explain myself and just being real. That this is not easy, and there's 100 things that we never get to talk about that are good behind the scenes, and these one things that happen that just there's no good answer. And yeah.
Well, thank you again for coming on.
Yeah, thank you.
And I guess we call it. Do we just want to say goodbye, Skylar? Do we want to run through the stuff?
I don't know. I think we'll
say
just
goodbye.
call it. Yeah, if
Let's
you
just say
are listening
bye-bye.
to this, it is important to all of us on the show that you know that we love you very much and we want you to stay safe.
Stay sane.
Stay healthy.
And stay away from me.